Straight ahead on Law&Crime Daily, Cristhian Bahena Rivera found guilty of murdering college student Mollie Tibbetts.
We just spoke to the family. They're relieved, they're pleased with the verdict.
Could Lori Vallow Daybell face charges for another death after she was indicted for the murders of her 2 children? Investigators of the Doomsday mom crossing state lines. Bill Cosby remaining behind bars after a parole board denies his release. The actor maintaining his innocence as the board says he failed to complete sex offender programs. James Prokopovitz is sentenced for the murder and disappearance of his wife, the victim's daughter pleading to know where her mother's body is. Welcome everyone to Law&Crime Daily. I'm Brian Buckmire along with Terri Austin. The verdict is in for an Iowa farm worker accused of murdering a college student and leaving her body in a cornfield. Let's get straight to it.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Cristhian Bahena Rivera, guilty of the crime of murder in the first degree.
That's guilty of the first-degree murder of Mollie Tibbetts. Our Angenette Levy has been following this case closely and is here to break down how the jury reached its verdict.
Yeah, Brian, 5 women and 7 men ranging in age from 19 to 71 sat on that jury. 3 were Latino and 9 were white. They heard days of testimony and they even heard from the defendant himself.
Mollie's no longer on this planet because of the defendant.
The state says Cristhian Bahena Rivera is a murderer.
Why would this happen? Because he's angry? Because he wants to have some sort of relationship with her? Because he finds her hot or attractive?
But Bahena Rivera took the stand and told another story, contradicting his own statement to investigators that he approached Mollie Tibbetts because he thought she was hot and she slapped him and threatened to call police. He told jurors he placed her body in the cornfield after being abducted by 2 masked men who killed her and put her in his trunk, which explains Tibbetts' blood being there.
Did you cover her with corn?
Sí.
Yes.
Why did you do that?
Porque no quise dejarla como que estuviera expuesta, muy expuesta al sol.
Because I didn't want to leave her, I didn't want her to be too exposed to the sun.
The defense suggested Mollie Tibbetts' boyfriend, Dalton Jack, had the motive to kill her, and investigators didn't investigate other possible suspects.
What happened here was they closed a case. They didn't solve a case.
Bahena Rivera's attorney says the state's story simply doesn't make sense.
The concept that he got angry and killed a woman who he had just met defies any logic.
Now, after the verdict was read, the prosecutors who tried the case spoke about how they're feeling about the verdict and about Mollie Tibbetts' family.
We feel great. I mean, this was the verdict that we wanted. It was the verdict that the evidence demanded, and it's great for all parties that justice was served.
They're relieved. They're pleased with the verdict. It's just the family of Mollie Tibbetts is just a great bunch, and they've been awesome to work with in this circumstance. Of course, it's always very tragic, and whenever something like this happens to a family like them or any family. And
Cristhian Bahena Rivera's defense attorneys also spoke following the verdict, and they said that they're, of course, disappointed by it, but they said they appreciated the time that the jury spent deliberating, which was a little more than 7 hours. They also discussed the decision to put Bahena Rivera on the stand.
We had a situation where a client gave a statement, and he had her DNA in the trunk, and he led him to the body. That's all pretty incriminating evidence. And from the very first day we met Mr. Bahena, the story he put forth on the stand was exactly the version of the events he told us going back to August 2018. He had never varied from that version of the events.
You know, I think there was speculation that we made some sort of, let's figure out a story. And I mean, if we were going to make something up, we would have came up with something better than that.
And Chad Freeze was asked by one of the reporters whether or not he and his wife, who they tried the case together, ever tried to find those 2 masked men that Bahena Rivera said kidnapped him. And Freeze responded that that would be kind of like trying to prove that there's not a Santa Claus. Bahena Rivera is in custody, being held without bail, and he will be sentenced on July 15th in Montezuma, Iowa, where this crime occurred. Brian?
Thanks, Angenette. Let's bring in co-host Terri Austin. Terri, is this the verdict you expected, and does 7 hours of deliberation sound about right to you?
The verdict that I expected, and I think 7 hours is the perfect amount of time. This was overwhelming as far as the evidence was concerned. We had video of the car, there was video of Mollie, there was blood in the trunk. There's no doubt that there was enough to convict. And I do believe that he himself undermined his story with these two strangers appearing and literally disappearing. So I think that hurt him very much when he got on the stand and said that, even if it had been something he had been saying all along. And frankly, 7 hours is just about right, because they must have been talking about Dalton, perhaps the fact that he might have been a suspect, but that rebuttal witness was excellent because it said, no, he's not a suspect. He has an alibi here.
Now, Angenette, Bahena Rivera faces a possibility of life without parole. Do you think he'll get the max or something lower?
Oh, I think he'll definitely get the max, just based on what happened in this case. This was not somebody that he knew. He was convicted of killing a stranger. And people who do things like that, they usually don't stop, unfortunately. So I think he will get the max. And even if he is ever paroled, he will be deported to Mexico.
And what did you make of the no reaction, Angenette, from Cristhian Bahena Rivera when the verdict was read in?
You know, it must not have been a surprise to him, but he also really hasn't shown much emotion or much expression throughout this trial. Even when he was testifying and talking about being abducted at knife point and gunpoint on the stand, we didn't see him reliving that and see a reaction from him. So I think to just see that he's acted the way he has throughout the entire case is not surprising.
And Terri, there's going to be an appeal. All defense attorneys are going to put in an appeal in this situation. But do you see any arguments that could work here?
I don't. I think Judge Yates ran a very tight ship. He didn't err at all as far as I could see. And he omitted the confession that was given before the Miranda rights were read. And so I think that was the right thing to do.
All right, so Cristhian Bahena Rivera case is now found guilty. Sentencing will be coming up on July 15th. Thank you both. Still ahead on Law&Crime Daily, why actor Bill Cosby won't be getting out of prison anytime soon. But first, why Doomsday cult mom Lori Vallow Daybell could be facing more charges for more deaths. The investigation spanning across state lines. Welcome back. The Idaho case against Lori Vallow Daybell in the deaths of her 2 children is on pause for now. But prosecutors in another state are now considering murder charges for the so-called Doomsday mom for another death.
Long story. She's had kind of a break from reality.
That's Lori Vallow Daybell's 4th husband, Charles Vallo. The two lived in Arizona and were married for 13 years. But in January of 2019, police were called when Lori took their son, JJ, and her daughter, Tylee Ryan.
He just goes nuts sometimes. But this time I caught him cheating, and I had evidence, and I told him about it. And he travels a lot for business, so I told him about it and told him not to come home, and that his stuff would be gone, and that his car would be gone.
Police were again called to the home in July of 2019, but this time, Charles Vallo was dead. Lori's brother, Alex Cox, claimed Charles came at him with a bat, and Alex said he fired in self-defense.
And he came at me with the bat again after he'd already hit me in the head, so I shot him to stop him.
It seemed like it was case closed. Lori moved with the kids to Idaho, and she married Chad Daybell. The kids were reported missing in September 2019, and their remains were later found buried on Daybell's property. Cox died in his home in December 2019, and his death was ruled due to natural causes. But in an indictment filed this week in Fremont County, Idaho, Chad, Lori, and Alex Cox are named as defendants in the murders of the 2 children. The 3 are also accused of conspiring to commit the murder of Chad's first wife, Tammy, just 2 weeks before Chad and Lori wed. According to court records, the couple endorsed and espoused religious beliefs to encourage and justify the murders. Previously, documents show investigators say they believed in an end-of-the-world doctrine. They apparently thought the children had been inhabited by zombies.
State of Idaho versus Lori Noreen Vallow.
Lori appeared in court on Wednesday, but her initial hearing for the murder charges was continued. A Fremont County judge on Thursday deemed Lori mentally incompetent to stand trial, delaying her case until a hearing on the matter is scheduled.
Does your husband live here or no?
No, he lives in Houston.
Gotcha. Okay. You guys
We're
got it.
separated.
In Arizona, the Chandler Police Department announced it has submitted murder charges for Lori in the death of Charles Vallo. The Maricopa County Attorney's Office is now reviewing the case and says they do not have a timeline for when a charging decision might be made. All right, Terri, let's jump right in this. When you read this indictment, so many moving pieces here, what do you think the prosecution's theory of the case is?
You know, they definitely believe that Lori, Chad, and Alex all worked together to plot the deaths of JJ, Tylee, and Tammy. So that's the one thing, that they all three were involved. They were texting or emailing or calling on the phone. So it's intimate. And then that their religious beliefs maybe supported their actions because they believed, in fact, that these people had zombie effects. And so they wanted to get rid of that. So that's one of the things I think the indictment is showing, that these beliefs are what supported their actions. But I think if you read between the lines, what the prosecution is going to be trying to establish in addition to that is the fact that money might have been a motive as well, because they are charging them with insurance fraud and also with Social Security fraud.
Now, Terri, this incompetency issue that's now popped up, a lot of people are asking about insanity defenses, if that's a possibility. What do you think this incompetency will play in effect if there is a trial that comes up?
Well, you know, in Idaho, there is no insanity defense. And for competency, we have to see whether or not she is ultimately found competent to stand trial. And if she is, then she will stand trial. She could say she had a mental illness and that, you know, she, in fact, was not fully aware of what she was doing. But the prosecution will then have to show that she had the mens rea, the intent to commit this crime. And that's very possible. They may very well be able to do that.
Real quick, Terri, do you think she'll be charged for Charles Vallo's death?
I think that they will be charged, or she will be charged for that, because I think the authorities gave that information. So I think it's going to come down the line.
All right, we'll see how it plays out. Thank you. Let's check in on some top stories making headlines on the Law and Crime Network, including rock legend Rod Stewart's court hearing. The British singer and his son are accused of simple battery in Florida. The Palm Beach Police Department says Rod Stewart and his son got into an altercation at the Breakers Beach Resort on New Year's Eve 2019. The two reportedly weren't allowed into a party when Sean Stewart shoved a security guard and the rock star threw a punch. Attorneys say they're talking about a possible plea, but haven't yet reached a deal. The judge set a tentative trial date for September 14th. Former NFL player Kellen Winslow II is spending 14 years in prison for sex crimes. Law and Crime host Jesse Weber is breaking down the conviction on his latest episode of Prime Crime.
Hey, Brian. So a few years back, one man was accused of various sex crimes, from rape to indecent exposure. And to the shock of the world, that man was star NFL tight end Kellen Winslow II. And on our show, we're going to go through the accounts of these 5 accusers to break down the evidence and see, did Winslow really commit these acts?
He held me, grabbed my arms.
Tell us what he actually did on the side of the car when you were in the passenger seat.
Well, he had me take my pants off and pulled me on front of the seat and, started to rape me.
Winslow's legal journey through this case was very unpredictable, and we analyze his major decision at the end that changed his life forever. Tune in to Law and Crime.
Thanks, Jesse. Coming up on Law and Crime Daily, everything you need to know about the murder trial of real estate heir Robert Durst. Plus, it's no laughing matter why one disgraced comedian is denied parole. Bill Cosby's team reacts to the parole board's decision next. We're back. Disgraced actor Bill Cosby is staying behind bars after a parole board denies releasing him from prison for the first time. Cosby is currently serving a 3 to 10 year sentence for drugging and sexually assaulting a woman in 2004. The parole board says Cosby failed to develop a release plan and participate in sex offender programs. A spokesperson for Cosby says he vehemently proclaims his innocence and continues to deny all allegations made against him. He's appealing his case, and the Pennsylvania State Supreme Court has not yet issued a ruling. Attorney Gloria Allred represents 33 accusers and says her clients just want justice to be done.
Mr. Cosby was not mistaken about whether Andrea consented, because look at the testimony of the prior bad act witnesses. If he is drugging and sexually assaulting other women. He knows that if a woman is incapacitated by alcohol or drugs, she can't consent. He's not mistaken about it. He's doing it so that they can't.
Back with us is co-host Terri Austin. Terri, the parole board said not making a release plan and a negative recommendation from the Department of Corrections were reasons Cosby was not to be released. Could he get another chance to be released if those things change?
He could, Brian, absolutely. See, he can only have to make a release plan. That is not that difficult to do. And he could also go do the treatment program. That can't be that difficult either. So those two things are pretty easy to accomplish. And I think if he did those things, that we would see the jail making a positive recommendation rather than a negative recommendation. And ultimately, I think if the recommendation comes from the jail positively, the parole board will ultimately say, yes, you can be released on, parole. So we'll see, but it's possible.
Yeah, and oftentimes people get denied the first time they go to the parole board, so that's not too strange or odd in this situation. Terri, also, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court has not decided on whether 5 prior bad act witnesses were too much for this trial. How do you think they'll eventually rule on that issue?
Those oral arguments were very interesting to watch. They really did, the justices, give the prosecution a hard time as far as these witnesses, these prior bad act witnesses were concerned. They thought that it was too far away in time and it was too different. So I think they're going to rule in favor here of Bill Cosby.
All right, we'll see how that plays out. If he gets a new trial, if the Supreme Court comes back and overturns the trial court's decision. Thanks, Terri. When we come back, convicted of murdering his missing wife, one Wisconsin man learns his sentence. Hear the tear-filled pleas from the victim's family ahead. Welcome back. The trial of the millionaire real estate heir accused of murdering his best friend is dark this Friday. But we've got you covered on everything you need to know so far. Robert Durst is accused of shooting Susan Berman in the head, execution style, in December 2000. Prosecutors say Berman had information about the disappearance of Durst's first wife and threatened to go to the police. His defense say he didn't kill Berman and doesn't know who did. Durst is expected to take the stand in his own defense. Be sure to tune in to Law&Crime Network, the only camera in the courtroom, for gavel-to-gavel coverage. And now to Wisconsin, where a man will spend the rest of his life in prison without the chance of parole for the murder of his missing wife. James Prokopovitz was convicted of first-degree intentional homicide of Victoria Prokopovitz. She disappeared in April of 2013, and after a lengthy investigation, James was arrested in May of 2019. Prosecutors say Prokopovitz disposed of his wife's body in a sludge pond to be with his new girlfriend. The defense focused on Victoria's history of mental illness, saying the missing wife took her own life. At sentencing, Victoria's daughter pleaded with the defendant to help her find her mother's body.
Our mom remains missing, and we will continue searching. I would even ask that if he were to tell us where she is, that if he gave us the answers we need, that you be lenient in your sentence. The answers won't bring my mom back, but they would allow us to grieve and to heal. And I would hope that with time, we could find forgiveness and peace in this tragedy.
He does care about his wife. There was a lot that went on over the last 8 years, and he is a very caring individual. And looking at those galleon factors and say that he has a terrible character, that's untrue. But as far as his character goes, I can tell you that he does love his family. He did love his wife. And he also loved his girlfriend, Kathy Friday.
I knew you weren't going to today say Victoria can be found in this location or that location. I'm hoping maybe after a while in prison, and it probably won't be a day or a month or even a year, maybe it'll be a couple years, maybe someday you will decide to give the answers to the children and let them know where Victoria is so they can put this to rest or get some closure.
Terri, let's talk about the sentence and the finality here. Do you think this was the right sentence, and do you think it could be overturned on, I don't know, appeal? Do you see any arguments there?
I didn't see any arguments there, Brian, for appeal. You know, in order to get a case reversed like this, you'd have to show that there was some legal error, that there was evidence that was not properly admitted, or that it was an incorrect jury instruction. And I just don't see that here. Or, you know, jury misconduct. I mean, I suppose that could still be possible, but we have no indication of that. And he definitely had good assistance of counsel. So I don't see that there's going to be any grounds for appeal here. Now, having said that, is this the right sentence for the crime? And I think it is the right sentence for the crime. I think he's 75 or plus. And I think that, you know, spending the rest of his life in prison is probably the right thing to do.
Yeah. Now, Terri, I know we had this discussion before. If Prokopovitz did come forward with information as to where Victoria's body was, do you think that he should be resentenced to a lower charge?
I personally don't like doing that, but you could tell that the family would really like to find out. So I think maybe here, yes.
All right, well, thank you, Terri. And thank you for joining us here on Law and Crime Daily. We'll see you next time as we discuss justice in America.